going to open up the doors of really advanced camera analytics, autonomous things. So think about autonomous forklifts or autonomous storage transfer units, autonomous robotic arms that are on the manufacturing line. All of these things become enabled by private 5G. One of the things that folks are being exposed to, but it's not widely adopted yet, is the concept of AR/VR. Exactly. The reason why it's not widely adopted yet is because there's some issues in regards to motion blur. People get a little dizzy and sick. You can tell you're in a digital environment. When the latency is low enough, those virtual environments become as real life in regards to what you're seeing and experiencing. There's no motion blur. It's moving and reacting faster than your mind can process.
Exactly. I have a question.
Yeah.
What's the difference between the 5G and the private network?
Yeah. So when you think about a cellular provider like US Cellular,
exactly,
you have a core network, which are the computer units that basically manage the data. You have the radio network, which are the towers that you see all over outside.
Exactly.
And then you have spectrum.
Exactly.
So a private environment is the idea that an organization or an enterprise would own their own core, own their own radios, and utilize their own spectrum that's completely separate from anything that the public carriers would be offering. So what it does for those organizations, if they're thinking about cellular technology at a large scale, meaning deploying tens of thousands of connections, hundreds of thousands of connections, they have to invest in their own network in order to make that make sense economically. Utilizing us in our traditional sense, meaning a public carrier and paying data rate plans for every use case that you deploy, operationally becomes way too expensive. So you invest money up front, capital-wise, invest in that infrastructure, and then your operational costs don't rise nearly as much as you're deploying the use cases. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. It makes sense. Now, I have a question about 5G and education. How do you think that the 5G will change the way that we educate kids or we run schools or college today? Do you think that 5G will make changes, and how does it affect the change?
Yeah, so you could approach that question multiple ways. If I want to think about how it could change the education environment literally,
yes.
An example would be deploying a smart lighting system. Folks think about smart lights and they think about smart lights in the vein of a light that'll turn on or off based off motion. But think about it from a safety angle. And so what that would mean is you could add modules to street lights on the campus, and say you have an event, you can actually have those lights create a dimming effect or a brightening effect to show the crowd what path they would need to walk to get to their vehicles after that event. Or it could just be students trying to get to class at a late night session. Ultimately what you're doing is you're giving people pathways to make sure that they don't get lost, they don't go into dark spots, and it just kind of helps with safety. Another thing to think about is advanced camera analytics. So I talked about low latency. You need really low latency if you want advanced camera analytics to be effective. So if you want to do facial detection and find out whether or not somebody's motion is considered to be an at-risk scenario of potentially becoming an active situation, you can have these cameras set up, but they require a lot of bandwidth and very low latency, so that's another direct impact that 5G will have for them. From an education perspective, meaning like how do we learn about it and think about it? So I had referenced on 4G the ideas of Uber and TikTok, and having 5G's capabilities within the curriculum will open the doors and the minds of these students as they're going through to think about that next new Uber, the next new TikTok, but in the vein of 5G. An example I like to use with folks, so Apple recently showed spatial computing as part of their Vision Pro consumer piece of equipment that they're selling, the AR/VR headsets.
Exactly.
Think about this. Imagine having an application where you have a spatial computing application that's for DIY contractors. Let's say you want to work on a home project on your own, but maybe you don't have all the expertise or the comfort to do it. It's ripe for the taking. Somebody can create an application that gives you access to contractors that will walk you through those DIY projects live. That's just one example that'll happen, and it's going to be enabled by 5G.
Now, what about the 5G and the manufacturing? Especially because you are speaking to the audience which are in for abroad, like it might be people in Nigeria, it might be people in Kenya, it might be people in South Africa, it might be people in Cameroon, it might be people in Ivory Coast, in Senegal, or it might be people in Rwanda and Tanzania. In those countries, countries like South Africa, Rwanda, they are bringing the 5G. But now, if a government wants to bring company from abroad like yours to invest in 5G in their country, like Angola last time came to the US and say, we are looking forward to have the 5G and we are looking for foreign company to come and invest. How do you think that the 5G will change the way that people run small business and then how they run manufacturing business?
So for small business, the thing I think about with cellular technology is it's enabled concepts like microtransactions to become more common nomenclature. What I mean by that is the more you're able to connect people, the more you're able to create easy transactions, that stimulates the economy, that stimulates growth. So, you know, imagine being able to create your own application and then have it on a phone and then be able to, you know, have hundreds of thousands of people access that within months. I mean, that's realistically capable. So the doors that are opening for these advanced technologies are very wide from an entrepreneurial perspective and for small businesses.
Yes.
From a governmental perspective, you know, I think what I look at with the governments of the world is the idea of really enabling the spectrum. Spectrum is everything. Exactly. And then whether they're a government that controls the wireless institutions, yes, or whether they look to private wireless institutions to manage it, it's really still up to the government regardless of what their infrastructure or their, I should say their overall structure of the two examples that I shared.
Exactly.
What they do is they have to enable that spectrum access. And so an example of that would be when South Korea hosted the Olympics. They really wanted to have 5G accessible there. So it took the government having to enable 5G in time for the Olympics event when it happened at the time. So I think about it in the same vein for all of the countries that are looking at this.
Okay. And one last question. In abroad, in African country, the e-governance is not too much developed. Like here in the US, whatever you want to do with the administration or federal agency is totally done online. Over there, people, sometimes they wake up at 5 a.m., they stay online until the evening because they want to access the service facility. Yeah. Is there these 5G makes huge change in that area in how a government in a developed country can provide quality service to his people?
Yeah, so at a macro level, you know, the government, when they enable these types of technologies, what they're giving people access to essentially is the ability to translate data, to translate information into something that's meaningful. So what does that mean? That could mean seeing an Instagram account that's marketing a towel that they're purchasing and reselling with their brand on it. Very low lift, but easy for an entrepreneur to start that business up. If you know that your society that you're trying to sell this product to has access to your Instagram account because 4G or 5G is enabled within your area, your outreach becomes instantaneous. You're going to create a lot of wealthy people very fast when you think about the business aspect of it. From a macro perspective, I think one of the things that, you know, this is currently, I think, a dilemma for the United States and for any of the you know, countries that have already deployed 5G, but you got to think about from an information management perspective as well, is making sure that you don't get lost in that information. And that information doesn't become weaponized and used to harm people or to confuse people or to mislead or to become distractions. And so I think at a macro level, the thing that should be thought about is, as much as I'm spending time and money into enabling technology infrastructure,
yes,
I should be also thinking about making sure that I'm investing into the awareness for those same communities, those same societies, to understand how to manage that data productively versus getting lost into the minutia and potentially distracted. That's actually a really big issue in the United States today that's leading into a lot of mental health concerns.
Exactly.
So that would be my advice on the macro level.
Thank you so much, Mr. James Rose. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak into the youth. There will be hundreds of thousands to watch you, and thank you so much for allowing us to share this in our channel. Thank you, sir. Thank you.